So think of it as self-preservation, the most pragmatic, even selfish reason to approach others with mercy, understanding, and forgiveness is rooted solely in the desire for such kindness in return. When a person adopts a posture of absolute severity toward another, say, criticizing an ex-Christian for deconstructing their faith or condemning an LGBTQ plus individual for existing, they are essentially petitioning the universe to apply that same unyielding severity to their own inevitably flawed existence. The teaching compels us, if we want to survive judgment, to cultivate a merciful disposition. You become the guinea pig for your own ethical framework. If your framework is rigid and unforgiving, guess who is next up on the moral chopping block? Spoiler alert, it's you. So now this is where the passage stops. Being merely profound and starts being absolutely hysterical. The true essence of prohibition is illuminated by the powerful analogy that immediately follows. The speck and the plank, or depending on your Bible translation, the log. In Matthew chapter 7, verses 3 through 5, it says, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when all the time there is a plank in your own eye?" I mean, and that's the end of the verse. So, imagine this visually. You're standing there trying to give someone constructive criticism. Maybe they used a bad word, or they chose to drink alcohol, or, heaven forbid, although I don't believe in heaven, but you know that phrase, heaven forbid, or if heaven forbid, they started listening to an atheist podcast. And while you're pointing at their minor flaw, the speck, you have a 2x4 sticking straight out of your head, obstructing your entire field of vision. This isn't just moral inconsistency, it's a profound, comedic, psychological blindness. The plank represents a substantial, often unacknowledged moral failing. It's the pervasive blow the individual is either unwilling or generally unable to confront. They might be judgmental, prone to emotional outbursts, or maybe they just have a nasty habit of believing things without a shred of evidence. By hyper-focusing on a neighbor's minor imperfection, that tiny speck, the self-appointed spiritual critical achieves a fleeting, temporary, and utterly false sense of moral superiority. It's the ultimate camouflaging mechanism for their own unaddressed massive shortcomings. Seriously, the logistics of this always gets me. You need a forklift to get that log out. The ethical imperative is not to correct the neighbor's dusty eye, but to undertake the massive, monumental task of self-reflection and personal spiritual carpentry first. This is the ultimate mic drop from the Sermon on the Mount. Before you even think about fixing anyone else, look at the giant piece of lumber currently impeding your ability to even see straight. If judge not were an absolute prohibition, we'd have to embrace moral anesthesia. we'd be forced to conclude that any ethical evaluation, say, judging that child abuse is wrong, or that lying is detrimental to society, is sinful. That's absurd. So fortunately, the scripture itself offers the necessary nuance. Sorry, the dog walked past and bumped the tripod. So let's get this thing figured out here. Okay. Now, so fortunately, the scripture itself offers the necessary nuance. And this is the wedge we can drive into fundamentalist arguments. Elsewhere, Jesus directs his followers to stop judging by mere appearances, but instead judge correctly. This is in John chapter 7, verse 24. So, So the prohibition doesn't target the simple act of recognizing moral failing, which is discernment. It targets the attitude and intent behind the judgment, which is condemnation. The judgment that is explicitly condemned is characterized by two things: superficiality and hypocrisy. Now, the first one we'll talk about, superficial judgment, the snap decision. This is passing sweeping condemnations based solely on outward appearances, incomplete information, or, worst of all, dogma. Hold on. This is a pervasive issue in traditional Christianity. Judgment defaults to appearances. Is someone dressed modestly? Are they saying the right phrases? Do they believe the same exact, often illogical things I do? This is how people become expert at criticizing others while avoiding any actual attempt at genuine understanding. The dismissal of scientific evidence, the rejection of differing beliefs, the utter refusal to accept geological records or evolutionary theory, all based on ingrained religious doctrine rather than open-minded investigation, highlights a fundamental inability to engage with objective truth beyond imposed dogma. They are judging the book by the cover, and the cover happens to be designed by a very fearful, dogmatic committee. And number two, we're talking about the hypocritical judgment, otherwise known as what I like to call the projection. This is the plank scenario writ large. It's the act of condemning another for a fault one commits or has secretly committed themselves. The Apostle Paul noted this phenomenon in Romans chapter 2, verse 1, but today we understand it as psychological projection. This is the behavior we see constantly from certain segments of the Christian population, especially when confronted with something that challenges their worldview. Their internal moral compass is broken, but instead of fixing it, they simply externalize the problem. They condemn the atheist for being angry, when their condemnation springs from their own unacknowledged anger at being lied to for years. They accuse the exchristian of being immoral, when their judgment is fueled by the secret jealousy that the exchristian is living a life free from crippling guilt. Therefore, judging not is not about moral anesthesia. It is about profound humility. Righteous discernment involves ethically assessing actions or ideas. For instance, like assessing whether a QAnon is a healthy belief system, while simultaneously refraining from the prideful, ultimate condemnation of the individual, a role that, within the framework, should be reserved for a higher power. The moment judgment is fueled by self-righteousness rather than a genuine desire for understanding or restoration, it inevitably devolves into the very hypocrisy it denounces. So, why the persistent failure to adhere to the stunningly clear command, particularly within communities that become highly critical of anyone who diverges? It's rooted in fear and the monumental effort required to sustain an illusion. People project their own unacknowledged faults onto their own unacknowledged faults onto others by loudly condemning the very behaviors they secretly despise or fear in themselves. They achieve several psychological wins, such as ego elevation. They create a temporary sense of moral superiority. I can't be bad if they are so clearly worse. For example, emotional release. External criticism provides an outlet for internal frustration, fear, and self-hatred. Fortifying pride. They solidify their worldview. If the atheist is wrong, then they, the Christian, must be right. If the exchristian is lost, then the Christian's faith, is justified. It's a closed, circular, and highly toxic security system. When you encounter a fundamentalist Christian aggressively judging, gaslighting, or viciously proselytizing at you, recognize it for what it is: a desperate, poorly constructed defense mechanism. They are trying to glue the pieces of their own fractured pride back together by using your perceived flaws as the adhesive. So your perceived flaws, they're not necessarily your flaws. They're perceiving it as flaws. They're perceiving, So the true weight of the judge not command then acts as a crucial defense against this destructive pride. It compels individuals to dismantle the internal structures of self-hatred and fear before casting judgment outward. It's a spiritual X-ray machine that demands a full body scan of the self before you even look sideways at a neighbor. So this principle has been starkly illuminated in my own journey. As an ex-Christian and now an atheist with this atheist podcast, my work is dedicated to fostering critical thinking and encouraging individuals to question deeply ingrained Christian beliefs. I advocate for rigorous research, acceptance of verifiable scientific evidence, and a deep examination of religious histories. I openly challenge the notion that unquestioning faith is inherently virtuous. My aim is to empower others to think for themselves and to reject indoctrination in favor of reasoned understanding. And what happens when I present verifiable facts, historical documentation, and scientific consensus? The response from many within Christianity is a masterclass in the very thing Jesus condemned: intense projection, clumsy gaslighting, and relentless, unwarranted judging. They demonstrate an unwillingness to critically assess their own doctrines or admit personal faults. Instead, they often cling desperately to belief over evidence, plugging their ears to any information that contradicts their worldview and condemning those who dare to diverge. I've been told I'm angry, which is projection of their own cognitive dissonance. I've been told I'm being manipulated by Satan, which is gaslighting by invalidating my thought process. And of course, I'm the recipient of relentless proselytizing, the judgmental assumption that my reality is wrong and theirs is the objective truth, despite mountains of evidence to the contrary. So here is the key contrast. The scientific method, with its inherent humility and acknowledging unknowns, its willingness to change its mind based on new data, and its relentless pursuit of verifiable truth, stands in stark contrast to belief systems that often stagnate in dogma, fearful of examination. Science says, I don't know. Let's find out. Dogma says, I know. And if you disagree, you are immoral. It is this very fear, the fear of having their plank exposed, that drives the judgmentalism. It's a desperate attempt by Christians who judge to maintain an illusion of moral superiority. To maintain an illusion of moral superiority by condemning those, like us atheists and ex-Christians, and whoever else contradicts the belief system, who dare to ask the difficult questions. If you are secure in your truth, you don't need to shout down or condemn those who inquire. You merely present the evidence and allow them to make their own conclusions. The fact that so many Christians who judge resort to personal attacks and condemnation proves that their foundation is built on sand, not rock. The command to judge not is not a passive plea for ethical indifference. It is a radical blueprint for introspection. It acts as a stark warning that the most immediate and significant obstacle to ethical living is not the perceived flaw of a neighbor, but the substantial hidden plank, that 2x4, lodged within oneself. The enduring power of this teaching lies in its demand for consistency and an unwavering commitment to internal responsibility. By directing our gaze inward first, the text strips away the comforting veneer of self-righteousness, replacing it with a demanding, transformative practice of humility and radical self-examination. The mercy we earnestly desire for ourselves tomorrow must first be cultivated and extended today. The discipline of non-judgment, when correctly understood, is the ultimate ethical endeavor and the ultimate sign of psychological maturity. So if you're still watching this, video, I thank you very much. I hope this analysis encourages you to carefully reflect on the source of the judgment you encounter and the source of the judgment you might inadvertently distribute. For my fellow ex-Christians, atheists, deconstructors, and the skeptics out there, I want to hear your stories. What is the most hilariously hypocritical plank in the eye judgment you have received since you left the faith? Or, if you have been an atheist all your life, that you've received in your entire life. Did it involve gaslighting, intense proselytizing, or just straight up moral condemnation? Drop your experiences in the comments below. Let's share some stories and remind ourselves that when people are busy criticizing your spec, it's usually because they need to distract from the lumber yard, that 2x4, in their own soul. Like this video if you appreciate deep dives into religious texts from a secular, critical perspective, and subscribe for more content dedicated to to rigorous thought and intellectual honesty. And if you really enjoy this podcast and you would like to support it, please consider making a $3 monthly donation by joining my Patreon and becoming a member. The link is below in the description. Until next time, keep thinking critically and keep your spiritual vision clear of large pieces of wood. Thanks for watching. I look forward to the next time we talk. Bye.